Before we begin the tutorial, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, my personal favorite marketplace for crochet and knitting written patterns, Ribbler. Ribbler is a free app/website that has lots of free and paid patterns, including written patterns from yours truly, uploaded by individual designer sellers. What's so unique about Ribbler is its amazing interactive pattern format. You can track your progress line by line, view stitch tutorials, convert units and the language, and all of my patterns are time-stamped with the corresponding portion of the video tutorials. But my favorite part of Ribbler is their software for creating patterns. As a designer, I love how easy and straightforward it is, and I don't even need to think about formatting because it does it for me. I always write up my patterns on Ribbler, and usually my patterns go on sale on Ribbler before any of my other shops. To get the most out of Ribbler, check out their membership tiers. With membership, you can skip the ads, remove the free pattern limits, convert PDFs to interactive patterns, receive free patterns every month, create your own tags and boards of patterns, and so much more. Use my code YEJIA to get 25% off your membership. To start the top, regardless of whatever customizations you want to add to the top, we're going to start off with the same base. Essentially, this tube top design is supposed to be stretchy and is supposed to be worn like a tube top, so it's going to be a little tight when you are trying it on, but it should hold up fairly well. Additionally, I have two different options for you depending on your chest size, and so for myself, I'm on the smaller end, which means that I can kind of get away with just using some rectangular panels to cover myself. But if you have a larger bust size that is just going to be choking in a rectangular panel like that, I suggest that you make actual dedicated bra cups. And if you need a tutorial for bra cup, I actually made this like corset style top using this exact same stitch, the Suzette stitch, and I show you in that tutorial how I make dedicated bra cups using the Suzette stitch. This pattern is supposed to be a little bit more beginner friendly, and bra cups tend to be a little bit more intermediate/advanced, but if you do require bra cups to fit your bust size, then I would recommend making the bra cups that I show you in that video tutorial. Otherwise, we are going to be creating essentially two different rectangular panels. The first rectangular panel is going to stretch over your bust. This measurement tends to be a little bit bigger, especially in comparison to your waist. And then the second rectangular panel is going to be the panel that wraps around your waist. And as always, make sure you're trying your make on as you go to ensure the best fit. We are going to begin with our slip knot. So to create a slip knot, you're going to wrap around these two fingers, twist, and then pull up your working yarn. So now you've created a slip knot. Look at this hook. I got the Woobles like Sanrio kits as like free PR, and honestly I don't really make plushies, and I just took the hooks out of it because they were so cute. So look at my cute little hook. Anyways, we're gonna slide the yarn onto our hook and tighten it up. When working the Suzette stitch, there are a couple things to keep in mind. The first thing is that we are always going to be working in even numbers. So if your measurements differ from mine, make sure that you are still working your stitch count in an even number to begin with. And this also means that we are going to start off with an even number of chains. So to create a chain, you're going to wrap your yarn around and then pull up. You just created one chain.
2, 3, 4, 5.
So I'm going to keep making chains until I reach 40 because that's the panel length that I'm going to use for the bust panel. I have successfully chained 40 for my bust panel, and as you can see, it's kind of long. When honestly, when you're starting off with this chain, the chain is going to be much longer than your actual stitch work is going to be. I've actually been working on extending this tube top into a dress, and as you can see, I'm still in the middle of it, but the tube top portion here, this is the first like top part of my bust panel, and as you can see, your starting chain is going to be a little bit longer than the actual stitches. It's gonna like condense, it's gonna kind of squeeze, I don't know. I have now chained 40, and I'm going to be working into the backs of my stitches as per usual. I always recommend working into the backs of your first chain because it leaves you with like a really pretty braid that's really easy to seam all together, and it allows for a really neat seam at the end. So to work through your back of your chain, you're going to kind of turn your chain So you're looking at these humps in the back. We're gonna skip this first chain away from our hook, and we're gonna go into the second chain from our hook into the back of that chain. So you're gonna go right in here. And to make the Suzette stitch, you're going to be alternating the single crochet and the double crochet. So we're first going to start off our rows with a single crochet. You're always going to start off your row with a single crochet, and you're always going to end it with a double crochet. To make a single crochet, you're going to yarn over once, pull up, yarn over once more, pull through both loops on your hook. Now we make a double crochet. To make a double crochet, you're going to start off with a yarn over, and then you're going to insert your hook into the same exact chain slash stitch, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, and then pull through the last 2. And now we are going to skip the next chain. So we're going to skip that next chain back, and we're going to go into the next one. So insert your hook, and then we're going to make a single crochet, and then we're going to make a double crochet. Should start looking a little bumpy like this. And again, we're going to skip the next chain into the next one, single crochet, double crochet. And you are going to continue repeating that stitch pattern until you get to the end of your row. I am almost done with my first row. I figured I would show you how I do the last couple of stitches. I have found that when I was a beginner, I would tend to lose stitch count or like accidentally decrease my stitch count always at like the beginning and the end of a row. I feel like those are a little bit trickier to understand exactly where to insert your hook. I have one chain back to skip, and I have my last one to go into. So I'm going to insert my hook, do my single crochet and my double crochet. This is what the end of that first row should start looking like. And then we are going to chain 1 and turn our work. Okay, let's talk sizing really quick. So essentially, I know a lot of people want me to be able to explain sizing and measurements before we even get started with the project, but in all honesty, when you're crocheting and everybody's tension is slightly different, it's a lot easier to start off with, and this is why I also always recommend doing a little tension swatch, gauge swatch, right? But even if you do, I would still always like recommend trying it on as you go. That's why my patterns are always made to measure. So essentially, what I mean to say is that after you make your first row, you get a better sense of the length of the first panel for your bust. And in terms of measurements, what you want it to kind of stretch over is from, imagine there's like an imaginary line from your armpit to your armpit, right? We're going to want this tube top to be right around that armpit line. And then you are gonna wanna go right under your boob, right? So this is the length that you want to chain and have, you know, however many stitches this measurement fits for you. Now I'll show you how we go ahead and work on the next row. So at this point we have chained 1 and turned our work, and now we will be only working into previously worked single crochets. So that means that you are going to skip that last double crochet that you created, and you're going to go into the single crochet that you created. And then from there, you're going to continue your Suzette stitch, which is the single crochet and then the double crochet into the same stitch. And again, we're going to skip over that double crochet, and we're going to go into our next single crochet. We're going to create a single crochet and then a double crochet. Yet again, skip and then go into your next single crochet, create a single crochet and create a double crochet. And you're just going to continue repeating this stitch pattern again and again and again and again. This pattern is very straightforward. It's a lot of repetition, It will get you pretty good at reading your stitches, especially if you are a beginner, since you need to know where to place your stitches and to recognize what is a double crochet versus a single crochet. My recommendation for that is, if you can't tell just visually because the stitches look a little bit too confusing, the loops are all starting to blur together, what I would recommend is like feeling it out. So feel out your work, and you can feel that this stitch is a lot bumpier and it's a lot thicker than it is here. Right here, there's almost like a gap. There's like something missing here, right? And that's how you know that that's your single crochet. And again, we're at the end of the row, and for a lot of beginners, this is kind of where you will accidentally drop stitches. So as you can see, that last single crochet, it's kind of like slanted over, it's like tilted over, but you're gonna want to make sure that you actually do insert your last couple of stitches into that last single crochet. And then again, we're always ending our row with a double crochet. And now we chain one, turn our work, and then from here, essentially, you are going to continue making rows and rows and rows and rows and rows and rows and rows of Suzette stitch until this panel stretches across and fits over your bust comfortably. So I'm just going to keep repeating row 2 essentially until I have a panel that wraps around my bust. Okay, so I've now completed 72 rows, and to determine if you have enough rows, especially because it is a tube top, so you want it to fit quite tight, what I would do is I would wrap it around and make sure that the two top corners here touch. I would also really recommend that you don't size while wearing something else on top, especially because you do want this to have quite a tight fit so that it will stay up. But I've already done my calculations, which is why I'm just showing you approximately where you would measure it on yourself in order to get the best fit. So laid flat and not like really stretched out, this is measuring about 24.5 inches for my 72 rows across, about 6.5 inches in terms of length. And I am again measuring right under my armpits. Like, imagine there's an imaginary line going from armpit to armpit and then all the way around. So in terms of how many rows I've worked in terms of measurements, I am looking at about a 4 to 5 inch negative ease, which just means that this is like 4 to 5 inches smaller than like my actual measurement around my chest, like where the top of the tube top would be. And that is again unstretched because this is quite stretchy. So now we are going to stack our edges up together and we are going to do a slip stitch seam across. So I've completed my last stitch and I'm going to give myself a chain 1, and then it really helps to sort of stack your work just like so. And then you're going to insert your hook into the first stitch here, and then the last chain from your first chain row, and you're going to yarn over and pull up and slip stitch seam your work. So again, you're going to go into your next stitch, into the next chain, yarn over and slip stitch that up, and continue your slip stitch seam all the way down, and then we'll start making the bottom panel or the waist panel of the tube top. Okay, so I have completed my slip stitch seam, as you can see here. That's what my slip stitch seam is looking like, and we are currently looking at the wrong side of our work, or the inside of our work. So the tube top on the outside should have a fairly nice seam right there, just like so. Okie doke. So also at this point, I would definitely highly recommend to try it on for size just to ensure that it has the best fit. Okay, so we are now ready to start creating the waist panel or the bottom panel of the tube top. Now there are a couple things to note before we start. You can definitely adjust the length however you want. The fewer stitches or chains that you start off with, the more cropped your shirt is going to be, and the more chains slash stitches that you work, the longer it's going to be. For myself, I don't really like it when tube tops are super cropped. I like them to be quite long. I just feel like they're a little bit more versatile in my wardrobe that way, but you can totally choose for whatever purpose or however you want to wear the tube top. For myself, I am going to go ahead and start off with 60 chains. So I'm just going to start making chains straight off of where we just completed our seam. So another thing to note is that at this point we are going to start cinching in the work in order to cinch in the waist panel and have it be much more fitted instead of it kind of being loose around the waist panel. In order to do so, I am going to create decreases for what would be the sides of our tube top, and the slip stitch seam is going to be the middle of our back. Okay, so let's talk math. I know everyone's favorite subject, but this is what is going to help you determine exactly how many decreases to create in order to best shape this tube top for however you want to customize it. So essentially the way that we are going to start counting is that every row of work that we have done on the bust panel, it is going to either correspond to one whole row by itself or less than that. What I mean by that is that in terms of construction, the seam line here is going to be the middle of your back panel. And personally, I'm going to be reserving 30 rows per front and back, so 60 rows total. I'm going to be reserving those 60 rows to be like worked as normal as I'm going to refer it. But then on the sides, I am going to create decreases in terms of like the width of the panel in order to make it tighter fitting. And for those, I'm going to be making a decrease row count, and I'm going to show you how I make the decrease row count. But in terms of the math, if I start off with 72 rows and then I work 60 split between the front and the back, that leaves me with 12 rows allocated for both sides, so 6 rows per side. And in order to successfully make my decreases, I need that row count to be divisible by 3. I haven't tried it extensively, so I'm not super confident about it, but I do think that you could use a number that's also divisible by 4, just depending on like how different your calculations and your measurements are. So aim for 3 or 4, and you're gonna see what I mean by these numbers. But to begin, we are going to go ahead and continue working the Suzette stitch just like you did to work up this bust panel here. So again, I'm gonna skip that first little chain, and then I'm gonna go into my next chain back and create a single crochet and then a double crochet. Skip the next chain, go into the next chain back, and create my Suzette stitch. And then I'll meet you back up when we are going to seam to the bust panel, and the whole decrease row count thing is going to make a lot more sense. So I'm at my last couple of stitches, and I just want to show you because it can get a little confusing, especially at this join area. So I am turning my work and I'm going through the last back loop that I see right here. And then I'm going to go ahead and finish off my single crochet and then my double crochet as well. This is the part where it can get a little tricky, especially if you're a beginner, but this is going to help you start to learn and understand how to read your stitches, quote unquote. So if you start pulling apart your work, you can see the little clumps that constitute a row. And so we're going to be working slip stitch seams into the sides of these rows. So for myself, this slip stitch seam is going to be the middle of my back, which means that I'm going to be working 15 rows to each side of the back, right? Because I allocated 30 rows in total for the front and then 30 rows in total for the back. So for the first 15 rows, I'm going to be working it like this. Now I'm going to be using a 2 slip stitch seam in order to seam this waist panel to my bust panel. So I'm kind of looking at the edge of my stitches right here, and I'm going to go underneath this first little bump that I see. And when I am seaming different panels together, I always make sure that I'm inserting my hook under 2 strands of yarn, because I find that only doing it under 1 strand of yarn, you're gonna get much more like obvious gapping in between the panels. So go underneath 2 strands of yarn. Yarn over, and then have a really tight tension when you're slip stitch seaming. And so now I see my next little slip stitch seam here. So I'm gonna go under not 1, but 2 strands of yarn, yarn over, and then slip stitch seam tightly. As you can see, those last 2 slip stitches are very tight. And now you're going to turn your work, and you're going to go ahead and skip that last double crochet that you created and into the last single crochet that you worked, and then create a single crochet and then a double crochet. And then you're just going to continue your Suzette stitch as normal all the way down the end of your row. Okay, so I have completed my last couple of stitches for the row, and I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, and then now again I am just going to continue working my Suzette stitch as normal, and then I'll show you again how to do the 2 slip stitches. Again, I am at the edge of my bust panel here to connect the waist panel, and then I am going to go into this first part of this bump right here, making sure that I go underneath 2 strands of yarn over, and then pull that up tightly. So that's 1 slip stitch, and then I'm going to go into my next little bump that I see here, under 2 strands of yarn over, slip stitch. Make sure it's really tight, turn your work, and then continue working your Suzette stitch. So I'm about to work my 15th row, and then I'm going to show you how I decrease my row count, which is basically using 3 slip stitches here instead of 2. So I'm going to work my way up, and that will be my 15th row, and I'll show you how I do my decrease. Okay, now that I have finished my 15th row and I'm back at the edge of my bust panel, I'm going to be doing a decrease of my row count, and to do a decrease, instead of only slip stitching 2 times, I'm going to slip stitch 3 times. So this is when, if you were doing the math earlier to calculate how many decreases would be applicable for your tube top, this is when I said that you can probably get away with doing 4. I've tested it out a couple of times and I have had very little issue with it, but my personal recommendation is to do 3. So I'm going to go ahead and into the first little stitch side here, go ahead and complete my slip stitch right there, go into my second one, so that's number 2. And then I'm also going to go into the next sort of stitch side here, or row side I mean. So that's 3 rows slip stitched all together. So essentially I'm working 2 rows per 3 row on the bust panel, therefore decreasing that row count. So for myself, I have allocated 12 rows for both sides, so that's 6 rows per side, in order to decrease that row count just by a little bit, just to really kind of cinch in that waist area. Okay, so I've worked my way back up and I am ready to do my final 3 slip stitch connection. So again, I ended on like the first part of this bump here, so I know that my first stitch is going to go in here, which is underneath these 2 strands of yarn. Just like so, giving myself a tight tension slip stitch, and then going into my next little bump right here. That's 2. And then that is 3. So now we can turn our work and then go ahead and work your Suzette stitch as per usual. Okay, so now that I'm done with my decreases, I'm going to go ahead and resume doing my 2 slip stitch connections for the next 30 rows, which is going to be my front part of the tube top. So I have now finished my 30 rows that will be for the front part of the tube top. I am ready to do another 4 rows of the 3 slip stitch connection, which basically just means that I'm creating the row decreases for the sides of my tube top, or the second side of my tube top. So I have now decreased my row count for one of my sides here, and all I have left to do is create all the rows that will close up the back portion here. And again, this is just using 2 slip stitch connections for the rest of our tube top. And again, just like depending on different factors like your yarn, your tension, your body shape, size, etc, 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 you might need to utilize the decreases more sporadically or more frequently, and it might be like more so evenly distributed throughout the project, or you can do it at the sides like I did. But just generally, this is how I create decreases in order to add some shaping to my work so that it's not just like a rectangular panel. Okay, so I finished my last row. I believe it's 15 rows, and I'm gonna go ahead and into the first chain that I see here, and then into the first stitch, into the first stitch on the other side, and then create my slip stitch seam all the way down. I'm just going to continue inserting my hook into the next chain that I see, and then into the corresponding stitch in order to slip stitch seam the sides of the panel together. And once I have completed that, I have essentially completed my tube top. As you can see, because I haven't tried it on yet, it's quite small, it's tiny, but it is done intentionally because it will stretch quite a bit. And so that stretch is what enables you to wear this as a tube top, and it will, you know, kind of adhere to your body. With a tube top, you want to use a lot of negative ease in order to, and negative ease is just saying that I'm making it smaller than my like actual body measurements, because you want to utilize the elasticity and the stretch of your stitches in order to help keep the top up as you're wearing it. So I'm going to continue creating the slip stitch seams all the way down, and if you just want a regular tube top, then at this point you're done. But I will show you how I create all the other different types of customizations. There are lots of different ways that you can go about creating a chain or a strap. If you don't like this way, or if you need a more secure method, you can totally easily Google some resources. I'll try to link a couple of different types of chains that I personally really enjoy. So for myself, I can just do a regular chain. So that is starting off with a slip knot and then just creating a long chain for my purposes. But yeah, you can totally create just a chain and then use that chain to add a strap somewhere that you want. But the real strap that I wanted to incorporate was actually a floral strap, and a lot of you have been asking me how I created this strap. I created again with just chains in between the little leaves and the flowers. But again, if you need a more secure method, I would recommend that you create that like secure chain in between the different flowers and petals and whatnot. I'm going to show you really quickly how I create those petals or those flowers and those leaves. So for myself, I'm going to start off with a couple of chains. Really, there's no like exact math or science behind this. It's really just a matter of vibes, like whatever the vibe is. Like if I want to add a flower, or if I want a leaf, or if I just want a chain section. The only thing is you just need to make it long enough for whatever your purpose is. To create one of the leaves, you're going to chain 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you're going to go back into that first chain that you created. Go ahead into these 2 loops and then just slip it together, and you've just created one of your leaves. And now I'm going to chain a couple more, just chain, chain, chain. So in order to create one of the flowers, we are again going to start off with a chain of 5, and then you are going to slip stitch into the first chain that you created, or the 5th chain from your hook. So slip stitch into there. Then we're going to start off with a chain of 3. This is how you make like each of the petals. You're going to start off with a chain of 3, and then you're going to insert a double crochet into the same stitch that you just worked into. So that's 1, and we're going to work 2 double crochets, and then you're going to make another chain of 3. So 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to go into our next little chain that we created. We're going to go into the next chain and then slip stitch that together. Then you're going to create a chain of 3 and then insert 2 double crochets into the same chain that you've been working into, and then create a chain of 3, And we're going to go into the next little chain here, slip stitch, chain 3, and then 2 double crochets into that same chain, and then chain 3, and then we're going to slip stitch into the next little chain, chain 3, and then 2 double crochets into that same chain, chain 3, and then we're going to go into the last little chain here, slip stitch, 1, 2, 3, 2 double crochets, 1, 2, 3. And then from here, honestly, I kind of like go through the middle of my flower and then create my last little slip stitch. So that way it kind of gives your flower a ruffled effect, which kind of makes it look a little bit more, I don't know, 3D, kind of pops out. And then from here you can just start chaining once more and creating more length to your chain. So I make it very random, and in all honesty, I'm very rarely counting when I'm making these types of chains. I just kind of go with the flow, and then eventually like I'll start kind of putting it on my body to see if the chain's long enough for my purposes, but this is in general how I am going to create my chains, my flower chains. One of the easiest little switches or customizations that you could do to this tube top is cinching in like ruching in the middle of your bust area, especially to create that sort of sweetheart neckline. And in order to do that, I'm gonna go ahead and fold my work from, this is the back seam, the slip stitch seam. I'm gonna go ahead and fold it just to determine where my halfway point is, and I see that it's right here, so I'm gonna go ahead and mark that general area with like a little bobby pin, stitch marker, whatever you want to do. And then I'm going to face it towards me, and we are going to take some more yarn and a tapestry needle. So all we're gonna do now is we're gonna take our needle and we are going to insert underneath a couple of rows, trying not to split the yarn. And then you're gonna go over a few rows, and then you're gonna go back underneath a couple of rows. I'm gonna go ahead and take out this bobby pin because it's actually kind of getting in my way, but so yeah, you're just gonna go in and out in order to create a cinched in, ruched effect on the bust. You're just gonna sew it in and out. As you can see, like, I'm just skipping a couple rows. I'm really, like, there's no exact science to it. Once you get to where the bust panel and the waist panel connect, that's when I would stop sewing down, and then now we're gonna sew back up. So wherever you went over, you're now gonna sew underneath, and then where you went under, you're gonna sew over, and vice versa. Like so. And then you're going to tighten both ends. So go ahead and tighten all of that up. Tight, tight, tight. And then you've created your ruched in effect. To create the off-the-shoulder cap sleeve, this is one side that I'm going to be attaching. And go ahead and start creating a chain that's going to be big enough to wrap around your arm. For myself, I am going to go ahead and chain 44. Okay, so I've chained 44 stitches, So I've chained 44 chains, and then we are going to work the Suzette stitch just like normal. So we're going to slightly turn our work and go into the backs of our chains, starting in the second chain from our hook, and create our single crochet and then our double crochet. And I'm gonna do about 5 rows of Suzette stitch, you know, no increases, no decreases, no nothing. Just work 5 rows, and then I'll meet you back up and I'll show you how we make these decreases in order to shape the actual like cap sleeve, as you can see. Okay, so I have done 5 rows of just Suzette stitch, and now we are going to start decreasing at each end. So that is what is going to start shaping the cap sleeve, is by creating these decreases. These decreases are fairly simple. All you're gonna do is on your first stitch where you would normally insert a single crochet and a double crochet, you're just going to do 1 single crochet, and then you're going to go to your next stitch and then create your double crochet. So you've just successfully decreased your stitch count, and then you're going to work your stitches up until the last 4 stitches normally. Okay, so I'm at my last 4 stitches, right? So normally you would put in a single and a double and then a single and a double, but to decrease, we're just going to put in 1 single and then 1 double at the very end. Turn your work, and you're going to create decreases on both sides yet again. You're just going to continue decreasing both sides until you get to a decreased amount or length that you like. For me personally, I decreased down to, I believe, 2, 4, 6, 8 stitches when I started off with 44 stitches, I believe. So yeah, I'm just gonna continue decreasing. Okay, this is another fun little customization detail that you could do, a scalloped edge. I am going to show you really quickly how to do it. It's fairly straightforward. I would begin at the seam and go ahead and insert your hook underneath your edge right here. And with your contrasting color, or if you're using the same color, it doesn't really matter. You're the maker, it's your choice. You're gonna create your little slip knot. There we go. And you are going to put that on your hook and slip it up. And now to start off our scallops, we are going to start with a chain of 3. So 1, 2, 3. I am going to insert 6 double crochets. That chain of 3 counts as 1 double crochet, so in total each scallop is 7 double crochets. If you don't want it to be as rounded, like if you almost want like a flatter effect, you can use 5 double crochets. Really play around with it to achieve the effect that you want. But I'm gonna go ahead and create 6 double crochets in the same stitch. I'm gonna go ahead and skip a couple of the sides of my rows. I'm gonna skip, like, you know, where we were inserting to create the waist panel. It'd be like 1, 2. Well, I'm gonna skip 1, 2, and then I'm gonna go into this like weird little middle portion here. So I'm gonna go ahead and slip stitch into that. And then I'm gonna skip over to the next little weird space here, and then create 7 double crochets. I feel like sometimes you can really tell that I'm self-taught because I don't really know proper terminology for a lot of these things. And then you're just going to continue repeating that sequence. So again, I'm going to go into that next little, not quite the edge of my rows, but like kind of in between, and then slip stitch, and then going into the next one to create my 7 double crochets. This is the finished tube top with all of the different customizations. I truly feel like all the design combinations are really endless with this. I feel like it'll be a very versatile wardrobe piece for me during the summer. I also think it's absolutely hilarious how I'll always ask you guys on my TikTok, like, what do you guys think about this? Like, which version do you like the best? And like, no one has one consensus. Like, everybody can't make up their own minds. And I'm like, I'm kind of glad that you guys are as indecisive as I am. Also, a special thank you to my Patreon members. If you would like to become a Patreon member, you would be greatly supporting me and my channel, and you get access to free written pattern every month and my master supply list, etc, etc. Feel free to ask me any questions you might have about the pattern. Hopefully, if I don't answer your question, somebody else within the community can. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!